Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're back again with the pandemic projects. It seems like we're in it for the long haul here on the East Coast, and I thought today we would do one. It's kind of an interesting one. It's the first of the crossovers. You don't even see it that much, but it was in production for quite a while. It was 1970s, 1980s. I think it may have actually stayed longer, but what happened was the Penn Gold series came in, the black and golds, the SpinFishers with the skirted spools. And that kind of made this one a little bit obsolete. This is the Penn SpinFisher 747. Basically, it got replaced by the SpinFisher 550 SS, the skirted spool. But this was a transition model. So we went from the 704, which had the internal spool, to a skirted spool, which means it ran on the outside of the rotor, with the 747. And they made some improvements to this that resulted in the 550, 650, 750 kind of SpinFishers. This is a larger saltwater reel. You can tell there's a little bit of greening going on the side of the case here. But it's time for a tune-up. So I thought since I found it and since it was a little unusual, we might as well go ahead and do that for you. So stay tuned. We got a ball bearing construction in this one. But I believe the 550 had more ball bearings in it, 550 SS. So let's get started. I'd like to start by taking off the external parts. In this case, I'm just going to take the spool off first. I do that by removing the drag tensioner right onto the floor and the spool. I'm going to put that into a parts tray so I don't lose it again. And you can see that a lot of this looks the same as your typical SpinFishers of the era. We got a drag stack in the spool that we'll get to in a moment. Here's your skirted spool. So in this case, if water got underneath, the idea was that the water was going to drip off the side and not go into the case. And if you had the rotor here, as you're going in a downstroke, the water certainly goes inside there, and it could eventually infiltrate the case below. Today's modern case designs are getting a lot better in terms of tightening up and waterproofing the cases. That wasn't so here, but the notion of that skirted spool did help. Okay, handle comes off in reverse. It's a screw handle. This one is missing its badges. That's not unusual for a reel of this age. And then we're going to take the 3 screws out that hold the case on so that we can get underneath there and remove that axle shaft and go do the tune-up. So we've got 3 case screws, and what I like to do with the case screws, as many of you have seen, is put them on the desk just to make sure that they're all the same size, because every now and then you find one that isn't, and you're in trouble if you don't remember which one went where. I do believe all of these are the same, but it's good practice to go ahead and do that, so long as you don't do what I just did with the knob there and knock them on the floor or something. Okay, they're the same size, so they can go back in any hole. Now we can pull our side plate off, and with the side plate the main gear came out. And we have bushings, so we only have a single ball bearing in this reel. It's a plastic nylon bushing on both sides there. What that tells you is that the 550, which is the one that went after that, was more popular because it had side plate ball bearings. And I think I have one, I may have one around here somewhere. Yeah. So here's an older pen that's in need of a lot of things, but you can see the ball bearing in here. This one happens to be frozen, so maybe the idea of a nylon bushing wasn't such a bad idea after all. But the upgrade, the one that replaced the 747, had the ball bearings on both sides as opposed to bushings. So that was one of the improvements Penn made when they went to that SS series. Okay, so we have a main gear. We'll go clean that one up in a moment. I'm going to pull the axle shaft off. As you can see, it's pretty easy design here. It's kind of the traditional stuff that's around till today now. You have the main gear with the back end crosswind gear that intersects with the other crosswind gear to drive the axle shaft up and down. And you have a tie-on to the axle shaft that makes that transition for you. So it looks like there's just a little bit of dirt in this case. So let's go ahead and do what we normally do here. Take it all apart. this is kind of the way I service reels. I don't believe in just going in and putting a drop of oil here or a drop of oil there. If I'm going to get to this point in a reel, I like to just take all the pieces apart, make sure that it's cleaned, make sure that it's ready for service and re-lubed. So I do service reels by mail. I know you're probably getting tired of hearing me say that, but when I do that, I do a complete service. I don't just kind of look quickly over it and say that's okay and kind of run away from it. I make sure that I completely disassemble the reel, clean it, and put it back together. All right, so that little bracket that is held on by the 2 screws holds the axle, and once you remove that, you can pull your axle shaft out. Now, pay attention here. You want to make sure you note the orientation of this crosswind block. I guess it is possible to put it in upside down, in which case your reel will not operate properly. So pay attention, take pictures. Don't be afraid to grab your cell phone camera or your stationary camera or anything you want to take pictures with, and take a picture of the orientation of that just so you know. Not sure if this one has a screw in it or not. Let's go find out. Sometimes there's a screw holding it on. There's a lot of grease on that, so let's, oh, in this case it's not a screw holding it on. All right, going to do some basic cleanup here. I'm going to grab a cotton swab and just clean out that old grease. Get it out of all those channels. Clean out the case. It's pretty clean as a reel. This is a little bit up top there. I'm going to grab a paper towel here. Get rid of the grease on the crosswind block, both sides. I'm going to put that into my parts tray, which is the bottom of a milk jug. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me knowing where those parts are, and I suggest you do the same. There's other people that use different ways to keep track of the pieces and parts. Whatever works for you. In this case, this milk jug thing has been working for me for quite some time, so I'll stick with that. But if you want to lay your parts out in a sequence on a mat, or if you want to do some other things that make you more comfortable in knowing where they are or how they came out, go right ahead and do that. I'm just cleaning out the channels of the main gear now, and I'm checking to make sure all the teeth are there and in the right position, that they're not bent or warped or chipped or otherwise. And the reel was running pretty good when I took it for a test drive there before we opened it up. So I think we're just into a basic cleaning here. Put that into the container. We'll do the same here with the axle shaft. A lot of people wonder about that Teflon ring there. You lose that Teflon ring, you're not going to have a fully functional spool. What's going to happen is it's going to bottom out. So if you've lost that, you better get a replacement for it. Don't think that that's normal not to have that. Okay, we're going to grab a wrench now. I'm going to grab a couple of wrenches because I'm not sure which one it is. And we're going to remove the top rotor because there is a bearing under there. So let's take the nut, take the rotor off. There's a keyway on here. If that pops out, you got to put it back in the square. We have a little bit of a flop here. That's interesting. We'll take that off. This is the anti-reverse ratchet. Let's see if we can disengage that. I'm going to pull that off. I just want to get to the bearing. We have a collar, and this is your bearing underneath here. Now, if you had to remove the bearing here, go ahead and pull the 3 screws and, oh, let's do it. We might as well. We got time. It's a pandemic. We're not going anywhere. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to start by taking off the anti-reverse dog. We have the click ratchet already. We'll pull the 3 of these. Now I'm going to get sloppy here. I'm leaving these parts on my desk because I don't expect to go far with this. But be careful as you swing your arms as you're reaching for a tool or something, that you don't knock them around, because you'll be on your hands and knees or whatever trying to figure out where those pieces and parts went. So there's a collar, and then we can pull this up. And this is the same bearing they use in the 550. You saw that on the side plates when we did that. And I will just take that off so that we can clean the shaft. So this one is kind of an interesting one. If you look at the parts diagram, I don't have it with me, but if you look at the parts diagram, it's got pieces and parts from everything. Like, for example, the side case here says 45 750, so it's from the 750 series reel, the SS. but the badging on it is a 747, right? So kind of fun. And some of the inside parts actually line up with the 704 or the 700 series. Some of the inside parts are the later series with the bearings, for example. But in all cases, it's kind of a mashup here of reels. But it's a nice reel to have. Like I said, if you looked at the 550 versus the 747, you'll find extra bearings. All right, so we just put that grease back on, put the bearing back on, spin it, make sure it's spinning. It's spinning nicely. I don't hear any noise in that. I'm going to put a drop or two of oil on there. In this case, I'm going to use Penn Precision Reel Oil. Make sure you use a fishing oil, not fishing reel oil. I'm just going to put a little spot of grease onto the bottom where it's going to sit in the bracket down below here. And I do notice there's a little bit of grease sitting up top there. So I'm going to grab one more cotton swab there. Being careful with all those pieces and parts I got laying on the table. I'm just going to clean that extra grease off the top there. Okay, we can reinstall then. We'll take the assembly, we'll place that in and make sure it goes through the bracket there. That's the holder. And the bracket's a triangular one. It can only fit one way. Let's go ahead and make sure we get it on the right way. Then we have the 3 screws. And those of you that watch me know that these little screws are my bugaboo, so if I drop them, we'll all laugh together. But just bear with me. I always figured that these designs of reels can't be too bad because they wanted to mass produce them, and many of these were done by hand in terms of the assembly. So if you're having trouble with something, if it seems like it's really an awkward way to do something, chances are you're not doing it the right way, because when they went to make these things for quantity, they couldn't afford to have something where the skill set was that difficult to go put these on. All right, that collar came on next. Here's that assembly that we had. There's a tine on this here. There's 2 sides to a fork. Those forks, this looks like it's a little dirty. Let's see if we can't grab that up and clean that up a little bit. That fork rides one on each side of the click ratchet, or the anti-reverse ratchet. That's the way the dog fits. Looks like it belongs on the side here. So when we come in, we're going to have to merge. Well, it must be a long day. My battery pack just ran out on my thing, so that's why the glove is off here. I was showing you before that battery broke that this is how that sits. So you bring that over the top here. This is your override. So you want to line that up. In this case, I'm going to flip that switch the other way because I don't have the clearance there for this. I'm going to grab the screw that holds that anti-reverse dog down. Trying to do this for the camera and do it for myself. It's not easy. Get that started. Now that has a collar on it, so make sure you get the screw all the way in on the dog and you don't trap that dog. And then we have to line this up, I guess as best we can, this click ratchet here, so that it can accept the bottom of this. So I think this takes a little bit of playing around, but eyeball wise it looks like we're even on all sides. And probably when we put this on, we should be close. Now this is rectangular here, so you have to find the rectangular side on the hole there. And with any luck, we're going to mesh it in, and we just meshed it in there. You can feel how it fell down. And we'll put the nut back on. And we're going to give that anti-reverse a turn just to make sure it's holding. And you can see it's holding, so we've got that meshed properly. Don't get frustrated if you need more than one turn there to get it right. Take your time and do it. Okay, we can go ahead and reapply the grease here. We saw when we took this out that this can be installed after you put the axle in. Most of the time that axle will trap and you won't be able to get this around, but in this case this one did. So it's easier to put the axle in first. We've cleaned it up. We got to re-grease it. Let's go ahead and re-grease. Now don't put too much on here. I kind of overloaded that a little bit because that grease will trap up top here when you come through. So let's go ahead and put that down. We want to grab our crosswind gear. That is one thing you need in order to reinstall the other part. And then the crosswind block. Remember I told you had to pay attention to which way this one went. And if I paid attention, we're going to get this right. And that was that it went this side with the kind of the fat side up. That's kind of how I identified that. Then a little bit of grease into each side of the channel that that's going to ride on. And we'll be able to come down with this. And we can have fun with small screws again. Here's your plate. It kind of locks in. I'm going to use a little pick here to get it just right. You want to get it centered. And then I'm going to use the let's get some grease on the screwdriver trick to see if we can hold those little small screws for a minute while I try and get them into the hole. I rarely have success with this, and I have continued to not have success here. But eventually I'll get it. As I mentioned, these are my bugaboo, so please stay tuned. If you want to go get a cup of coffee, should be done by then. There's one of them. Let's see if we can get 2 out of 2 here. Just trying to make sure that we're centered. Nice reel. So it is a transitional piece. That's why you don't see many of them. The people voted for the 3 ball bearings as opposed to the single ball bearing with the 2 bushings. I guess when it first came out, you didn't have that option, but as soon as the SSG series came out, you did have that option, and folks decided they were going to go for that. We've greased the main gear. We've greased the pinion gear up top. We just need to put that in there. A little bit of grease onto the main gear shaft here, which is going to ride in that bushing, and we can close this reel up. Nice snap. I like it when I hear it that way. And then we'll go up top with the spool just to make sure that the drag washers up top are okay. Again, when you do a service, it's nice to do the complete service. There's no reason why, if you're taking the time that you are to tune the reel up for the coming season, that you take a shortcut. I understand, if you're in the middle of the season and you had serviced the drags previously and you had a problem internally where something was starting to squeak, well, sure, in that case, just go fix the squeak. Go put a little bit more grease in there or whatever it might take. But if you're doing a tune-up for the beginning of the season, make sure that you address the pieces. This bail is just a dead end on this side. You don't need to do anything. I like to put a squirt of penetrating oil in where the spring is housed. And I also like to put a squirt of oil on this. Now that's not a roller bearing, so you really don't need to do much there. If it was a roller bearing like the modern reels, then sure, you want to put some oil onto that bearing as well. I'm going to put the handle back on right now. This is reverse, so you're going to go counterclockwise to screw that in there. And like it was born yesterday. Nice little reel. This has the bang close. There's nothing magical going on there. There's a spring in here that assists. But what happens is that arm is just going to knock against that, and that's what your bail trip is. There's no internal bail tripping on this reel. All right, one last thing then. Let's grab this bearing drag system here, and let's just see if there's anything going on. I use a pick. There are some indentations along the way here, so just find that indentation, slip it behind the C-clip. Easier said than done. There we go. Hold it because it's a spring, and then you can fish it out with that same clip. I think what we're going to find is there you go. Okay, so we have a series of washers here. There's two fabric washers, probably the same as the Penn 60. Kind of looks that way. And these are flexible, so they're still in good condition. They're leather washers, so you don't need to do anything with those. So what happens here is we got a flat spot first. It's an octagonal shape. Then we had the Teflon washer. Then we had the first of the round washers. Then we have these two rubber washers, or not rubber, leather washers. I'm going to put a little bit of Cal's Universal grease on that. As much as I hate to do this, I'm going to rub that in with my hands without the glove. I'm going to put that one into the center. Then you have the hectagonal for the middle washer. One more of these. Top one now. And then we can reinsert that C-clip. So those are ready to go another season. I think if this went too much longer, probably would want to check on replacing those washers, just because I probably would feel better about it. But for now, those washers are in fine shape. So it doesn't mean because they're leather washers they're not going to be good. It doesn't mean because they're several decades old that they're not going to be good. But if you want to rest comfortably that you're not going to tear them up and you're taking the time, you can go ahead and order them and get the replacement there. Okay, so all we need to do now is button this one down, put that adjuster on. Getting closer. Okay, we're nice and tight now. Good. So that's good. I'm going to give it a test. Like I said, like it was born yesterday. Working nicely. Now, last thing we do for service, if you're not taking this reel fishing tomorrow, back that drag off. You don't want to press all the grease out. You don't want to get it stuck to the washer. Just back it off to where you can spin it freely without losing your drag knob. And then just put it in the storage or put it on your pole and just wait until it's time to go fishing. Then you can set it and forget it. So there you go. That's the Penn SpinFisher 747 transitional reel. It was one that went from the internal spool to the skirted spool. It had the design where the water would flush over the top of that rather than infiltrate the reel. And had a single ball bearing up top with two bushings. The 550 series, the SS, the skirted spool series. Replaced those bushings with bearings and kind of obsoleted this reel. So it's a transitional reel by Penn. And if you see one out there, you can probably find it relatively inexpensively. And boy, it's built like a tank. Kind of lasts forever. And if you have one, take it fishing. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Please stay safe, stay home, stay inside to the extent that you can without going nuts, and we will get through this pandemic. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave comments, subscribe if you're not subscribed already to see more, and stay tuned as we continue to work on these pandemic projects. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.